Picture where we ended our last scene. The treated water or effluent leaves the plant. It enters the receiving water, a river, and the river keeps moving, carrying that water past reeds and rocks, fish and insects, kids skipping stones, people walking dogs, maybe even a drinking water intake downstream. Now I want you to do something powerful. We're going to rewind the story. Same upstream situation, same city, same homes, same pipes, same river. But this time, the wastewater treatment plant is missing. No headworks, no aeration, no clarifier, no disinfection. Just a direct pipe. Home to sewer to river. And now I'll ask the question that defines why this job exists. What do you think would happen if sewage entered the river untreated? Take 10 seconds and answer in your head. Some possible answers people give are, the river is big, so won't it dilute all the pollutants in the river, so it wouldn't matter, right? I think the river will just wash the pollutants away, won't it? I'm sure the river might smell bad for a while, but doesn't nature provide microbes that naturally feed on the waste and sewage? So in that way, won't microbes make the waste disappear? So in that way, nature will handle it, right? Also, doesn't sunlight kill the germs in the river, so the river will become safe, right? Wait, don't you think that fish can handle dirtier water than us humans? So can fish live in water made dirty by sewage? If you thought any of those, good. Not because they're right or wrong, but because you're thinking. And thinking is what operators do. Now let's test those ideas in 3 parts. Part 1. It's early morning. The river looks calm, but something feels wrong. Near the shoreline, fish are floating, belly up. Not 1 or 2, many. Now here's the shocking part. The river might not even look black. It might not look like a sewer. It might look normal. So why are the fish dying? Let's make the river feel like a living room. Imagine the river as a house with all the windows closed. Inside that house are living creatures, fish, insects, tiny animals. And oxygen is the air inside that room. The only air available to them is the air already trapped inside the room. Fish don't breathe air like we do. They breathe dissolved oxygen, which is oxygen that is mixed into the water. So the fish cannot breathe oxygen directly from the air. They breathe the limited oxygen that mixed into the river water. That is why a river is like a house with shut windows and shut doors, and the only oxygen available to the fish is the oxygen already trapped inside the room. Now picture what untreated sewage brings into that room. It brings a load of organic matter, tiny pieces of food, bits of poop, food waste, grease traces, paper fibers, body oils, all the leftovers of human life. To us, it's waste. To microbes, it's a buffet. And microbes are nature's cleanup crew. The moment that buffet arrives, microbes wake up and start eating. But here's the key science. Microbes don't just eat, they breathe. When microbes break down organic material, they use oxygen very rapidly, the way a fire uses oxygen. So untreated sewage that enters river water does 2 things at once. 1, it adds too much of uninvited food for uninvited microbes. And 2, it triggers a microbial feeding frenzy. More food, more microbes grow. More microbes, more oxygen consumed. More oxygen consumed, less breathing space left for fish. The room, which is our river water, is closed shut. The room is now overcrowded by microbes, and the air left for breathing for fish is depleting. The only way for the room to take in more air is slowly, and it is through tiny cracks in the windows. This is because the river water does have some ability to refill oxygen inside it, but it can only do that slowly. The river can refill oxygen in 2 ways. When oxygen from the outside air slowly diffuses into the river water, and when plants living inside the river water provide oxygen to it in daytime. But when sewage hits and an overcrowd of microbes enter, the oxygen withdrawals happen fast. The microbes consume oxygen faster than the river can replenish it. So the available oxygen level drops like a room losing air. This causes suffocation. fish begin to stress. They swim towards the surface. They crowd near the windows of the river room, which is the river's surface. They try to find oxygen, but they can't get oxygen fast enough. And when the oxygen drops too low, they suffocate. Not because the river is poison, but because the river has been robbed of its breathing space. This is where we introduce our first villain name, BOD. It is the name for that oxygen-robbing demand. BOD is short for biochemical oxygen demand. Think of BOD as the river's oxygen bill. It's the measure of how much oxygen the microbes will be ready to rob from the river while they break down the organic material in the water. So when BOD is high in water, it doesn't mean there is no oxygen yet. It means oxygen is about to get consumed, fast. The microbes become the oxygen thieves that show up when sewage brings too much food for them. Untreated sewage can make a river gasp. Now, in that same fish kill scene, there's another punch. Sometimes fish die fast, not slowly. That's when another character is present in the sewage that mixes with river water, a chemical that hits fish like a sudden poison. This second villain is ammonia. Think of ammonia like a sharp chemical sting in the water that fish cannot escape. So two villains are at play in the river because of untreated sewage. Oxygen is getting stolen because of BOD effect, and fish are getting chemically stung because of ammonia effect. So here's the truth. The river can become unsafe for fish faster than most people can imagine. Now, let's jump forward a few weeks. It's summer. The river is starting to look strange. Green, thick, like soup. Along the edges of the river, it smells like rotting grass. People have stopped swimming. Dogs are getting sick after playing in the water. This is an algal bloom. But what caused this? Not dirt. This is caused by our third villain, nutrients. Nutrients are chemical elements that living organisms need in order to grow. They are the fertilizers we add to soil to make our plants grow, that farmers add to their crops, landowners add to their gardens. These nutrients get carried into the water by rain falling on lawns, trees, crops, and gardens. For algae and rivers, the two most important nutrients are nitrogen and phosphorus. Nitrogen also enters our water from urine in the form of ammonia, decomposing waste, food proteins, and industrial discharges. Phosphorus additionally enters our water from human waste, detergents, food waste, and cleaning chemicals. When untreated or poorly treated sewage enters a river, it increases nitrogen and phosphorus concentrations, which are nutrients for biological growth. And biology is not polite. When it gets too much food, it grows out of control. The same way that microorganisms in part 1 were always there in small amounts, and when they suddenly got too much food, they grew rapidly and competed for air and food against other living things in the river. In the same way, in part 2, algae are also present in rivers in small amounts. In a healthy river, the algae don't have access to enough nutrients to grow. But when excess nutrients arrive, biology responds immediately, and algae grow explosively, and you end up with an algal bloom. One good thing is that algae don't require oxygen. They breathe carbon dioxide like plants, so they don't deplete the breathing space for other fish and aquatic animals in the river. In fact, they create oxygen during the day like plants, and also reproduce to create more algae. But unlike plants, algae are very tiny and very fast. When they grow, they make millions, billions, and trillions of them. They completely occupy the river. At first, this still seems harmless. At the end of the day, they do provide more oxygen to the river, right? Yes, right. But that is only during daylight. And because algae are green-colored and float in the river, they cover the river during daylight and block sunlight from reaching the plants living underwater. If plants are blocked from sunlight, they can't generate oxygen, and this slows down the slow, natural process by which the river can replenish its own oxygen.
On top of this, at night, these algae breathe in oxygen, very much like other plants. Just imagine millions, billions, trillions of algae cells all consuming oxygen at once. At night, their large numbers completely deplete oxygen from the river, and once again, there is less breathing air for fish and other aquatic animals. Between day and night, the river becomes unstable, swinging between too much algae growth and a lot of oxygen during the day to too low oxygen and suffocation of aquatic animals in the night. After a few days, the algae have eaten all of the nutrients from the river, and now their food is all gone. Now the algae begin to die, and like an uncontrollable chain, they start to die in large numbers. We don't want dead things in large numbers in our river. Nature is not used to this. The natural law is for dead things to become food for others, and so the dead algae become food for the bacteria, back in part 1. Like a cycle, trillions of bacteria attack the dead algae as food. This exercise causes bacteria to use even more oxygen from the river. Fish struggle again. The nature that is supposed to protect living things in the river is swinging out of whack, causing aquatic plants and animals to die. All because of large quantities of sewage being dumped into the river before the river could learn to handle such a big change. So the big takeaway from part 1 and part 2 is that too much organic matter and too much nutrient input can turn a river into a biological accident. Part 3. Now we shift to the most important scene, because fish are not the only downstream neighbors. People are. A community draws drinking water downstream. A person fishes and cleans their catch. And then people get sick. Not instantly, but quietly. Stomach illness, fever, infections. And the catch? You can't always see the exact cause, because the fourth villain is microscopic. Our fourth villain is pathogens. Think of pathogens as invisible hitchhikers that can spread illness when sewage is untreated. So even if the sewage water didn't kill the fish yet, didn't cause a colorful algae bloom yet, the river may look fine at first sight, but it still carries these invisible villains. Pathogens are disease-causing microorganisms. All microorganisms are living things too small to see with the naked eye. A lot of these microorganisms are helpful to us to maintain the balance inside our body. They maintain our skin as healthy. We use them to make medicines, in fact. But some types of microorganisms are harmful to us. These are called pathogens. Types of pathogens that we can find in untreated sewage are bacteria, like E. coli, viruses, protozoa, and parasite eggs. These pathogens travel with sewage. They survive for hours, days, sometimes weeks, and we cannot see them. So how do these pathogens reach people when they enter a river along with untreated sewage? Swallowing small amounts of water from the river while swimming, children playing near the shoreline, fishing and cleaning fish, drinking water from the river, using river water as irrigation for crops. Even tiny amounts of these pathogens can cause illness. You do not need a bucketful. Sometimes only a small exposure is enough. So please remember, clear water does not mean safe water. This is one of the most dangerous illusions in environmental health. So when we say, what happens if we do nothing, we're really asking, what happens when these 4 invisible villains travel downstream with no one to stop them? Here are their traits. BOD is the oxygen thief. Ammonia is the sharp chemical sting to fish. Nutrients are the food for explosive algae, and pathogens are the invisible living things that make us humans sick. Notice something important. These are not just 4 random science terms. These are different kinds of harm, different kinds of damage. And that is why treatment plants exist. They exist to block harm, to protect your downstream neighbor. Without treatment, a river becomes a delivery system for disease. With treatment, it maintains its original purpose, a living ecosystem in balance. Now let's return to one of the most common questions that come to mind. The river is big, so why doesn't it dilute all the pollutants, aka villains, in the river? That sounds reasonable. And yes, dilution does lower concentration, But dilution does not remove the villains from existence. Dilution is just making the problem thinner by spreading it to a wider area, and some problems don't disappear when spread. In this case, oxygen still gets low, toxins still sting the fish, algae still grow, pathogens still travel. So we replace the myth with a stronger truth. Dilution thins out the problem by spreading it to a wider area. It does not destroy the villains from existence, and their harmful impact is still present. And engineering exists so that these harmful villains can be destroyed before they reach our downstream neighbors. If you are training to be an operator, you are training to be the person who prevents these harms from happening. Most people never connect a flush to a fish kill and a drain to a child getting sick. But you do because you see cause and effect. That is professional thinking. Now that you've seen the harm, we're ready for the next step. Next, we will zoom in and learn what the invisible enemies are properly and how their characteristics decide our regulatory restrictions around pollutant limits in wastewater.
Now, let's jump forward a few